In my second episode of YA Inc., How to Start Writing a Novel, I talked about agents knowing whether or not they wanted to represent your book by reading just the first page. The first page is also very important even after it's published, because when someone wants to buy a book, the first thing they'll read is the synopsis on the back of the book. Then they'll read probably the first few pages of your book, and then they'll decide if they want to buy the book or not. So you're going to need a good beginning of the book. You need to hook your reader into continuing the book. Using dialogue is how I tend to start my short stories. You just jump straight into a conversation between two characters, and you have to make sure the conversation is something interesting that'll spark the reader's interest. Starting with an action scene is something you can't do with every single novel, because sometimes when you first start a book you need to worry about introducing the characters first. And when you go into an action scene, you can't introduce the characters. You need to jump straight into what's happening. It's really fun to start off in that high tension scene with a lot of emotion. And there are a few books I've bought just because of the fact that the first chapter of the book was an action scene. This is one of my favorite things to do with some of my short stories, especially when you combine it with dialogue. You have a character ask a question, "Are you okay?" And you could also have the characters thinking to themselves, "Why am I putting myself through this?" I've never seen anyone actually use this technique, but I think it'd be a really fun and creative way to start off your novel, and it'll really make someone want to read on more and see what it's about. Her blood-red lips crept into a smile as she took out a knife. I've used this technique twice before with essays I've written, and they were very successful. You could do something like this. By definition, valor is determination to face danger. This is almost like the action scene where you jump straight into the story, but you don't need the action. You could have a character starting off with thinking about a problem that they need to face, or you could also just have the character facing the problem right then and there. This is almost like a dilemma, but it's purely the emotion the character is facing at the time. The emotions need to be strongly displayed, whether they be sad or angry. When a reader experiences such strong emotions, they want to keep on reading the book to see why the character is feeling this way and what their motives are. If anyone has ever read one of John Steinbeck's books, you know he starts every single chapter with description. And personally, I'm not in love with this technique, but I know if you do it the right way, it can work. I suggest if you do this, point out something that's not supposed to be there. Say you're on a beach. Start off by describing the beach, and then maybe point out the little boy that's in tattered clothes crying. Flashbacks are a good way to fit in the character's background story. It'll also keep the reader wanting to move on with the story to see when this character will pop up. Usually this means the first chapter will be a flashback. Then when you move on to the next chapter, we'll be back in the present. So this also means that when you start the second chapter, you need another hook in the story to keep the reader wanting to move on. This is just like a flashback, except of course it takes place in the future of the novel. It means you jump into the climax in the first chapter of the story right then and there, and then when you move on to the next chapter, you are back in the present time. So it can sometimes leave the reader thinking, and they'll be a little confused, but it'll be in a good way, because then they'll just want to keep reading more and more to see what's going to happen. A prologue and a preface is an introduction. I believe preface means that the introduction has some sort of action scene going on. For my book Essence, it actually originally had a preface, but then I changed it later because I didn't like it as much as I wanted to. And you can actually view it right now by clicking this link. It'll take you to my website, which has the preface. It's very short. The prologue and preface usually aren't connected to the rest of the book. It's almost like a flash forward or flashback. It just gives you this sort of information that you don't necessarily need at the time but will need later in the novel. Obviously, there are so many ways you can start off writing your book to hook the reader in, and I didn't even name all of them. You can even combine techniques to make it that much better. If you have questions about this video or have requests for future videos, leave a comment below or email me. I also have a Facebook and Twitter page, so be sure to head over there. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.